Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
And I'm Joe Healy with DevilsDigest.com.
It was nice to have like a weekend off, got things done. Wife and I went to a little house hunting over the weekend, but also got to catch some of the college football games. But Joe, I think it's about time for Sun Devil football to get right back.
Yeah, I had my godson, Cam. His birthday party was this past weekend, which is always great when, family member birthday fits on a bye week, because we all know about like the no fall weddings thing. You can include like fall birthdays, even though I got one of those. So that was nice to do. But as you mentioned, about time to get back to business. ASU hits the field this Saturday we may chat about whether it's a must-win game or not, but I think that if you don't think it's that way, that it's dang close. A big one on deck for both teams as the Sun Devils welcome the Kansas Jayhawks to Tempe.
Yeah, the Jayhawks have fallen from the ranks of the top 25 after a rough start, but as we'll talk about with our Kansas Insider a little bit later on, this is still a team that's got a lot of good players, so it should provide a very interesting matchup, provided the Jayhawks are able to handle the heat with a 5 p.m. kickoff. Temperatures at that time supposed to still be well over 100 degrees. I actually looked this up. The record temperature in Lawrence, Kansas all-time was 114, but that was way back in 1936. So they haven't had anything like that in the last 80 years. So this might be a shock to their systems.
Yeah, for many of us, myself very much included, because I'm a dude that like runs hot personally. Obviously, I've lived in Arizona the majority of my life, which doesn't necessarily bode well for someone of that sort of capacity. But yeah, as much as we've all been complaining about the extension of this summer that will not end, could work to ASU's favor this weekend, because that will probably be quite an alarming situation for the incoming Kansas Jayhawks. And if ASU can get some advantages in the conditioning game, and maybe players, cramping up, not saying I wish, any sort of injury or harm upon anybody, but strategically it works toward ASU's advantage to have some scorching temperatures in Tempe, even with the 5 p.m. kickoff. That is a benefit.
Kind of interesting that, after the whole Pac-12 era, and then we're not used to any kind of like kickoffs while the sun is up until at least around Halloween or into November, but Big 12 just you guys get after it.
Yeah, and I think it's, almost harkening back to the days of ESPN Game Day being in the house. Yeah. I believe that was October 1st against USC in 2005. That was a day game, absolutely on fire. But that haunted ASU. Not that we're taking a near 20-year, retrospect in this episode here today, but that worked against ASU. Conditioning worked against them in that particular game. So obviously hoping for different fates this Saturday.
All right, so before we talk to a couple of Sun Devils and get their perspectives on what lies ahead this weekend and how they've sent the bye week, it should just be real light on the news front as of right now, as of recording here on Monday night. Utah's kickoff, of course, has been known for a little bit, but next week's game will be the last non-Saturday game on the calendar as Utah comes to town reeling after a loss to Arizona. May or may not have Cam Rising back. But the Utes will be kicking off here on Friday, October 11th at 7:30 p.m. Pretty typical for this time of year.
Yeah, pretty standard stuff there. We'll see what the rest of the kickoffs, bring about for ASU as the season wears on, especially some of those road games in colder climates. But yeah, we'll talk about that Utah game when it's up ahead. I know a lot of folks, again, myself included, quite shocked by the outcome of their ball game last week. But if that shows some weaknesses, and if they are limited personnel wise, especially at QB1, maybe that can create some opportunities for ASU. But that is a game that we'll preview when it gets to. I know that Utah is obviously a fine and dominant program, but yeah, we'll see if we get any weird kickoffs. Hopefully, as always, for the remaining games that are going to be played at ASU, I cross my fingers for those late afternoon kicks, those mid to late afternoon kicks, the 3 to 4 o'clock. That's what I'm hoping for when those opportunities are up for grabs.
It's going to be certainly interesting to track some of the kickoff times when ASU heads back to some of these conference games back in the Eastern time zone. Of course, one coming up against Cincinnati on October 19th. So, but Joe, before we dive into what lies ahead this weekend against Kansas with our Kansas Insider and our game preview, let's talk to a couple of Sun Devil players. Of course, coming off a bye week, a chance to heal up a little bit and see what they've been up to, and also get their thoughts on this crucial Big 12 battle. All right, so Kenny talked about, the bye week being an opportunity to just kind of self-scout and kind of take stock of what's been happening so far. What are some of the kind of the impressions and things that, when you look back at your play, the play of the defense through these first 4 weeks, what's really kind of jumped out to you?
It's been solid for the most part, but all the guys, or even the whole team, we know we could be better. We could be a lot better. So having those 4 games to, kind of see ourselves in a live action, different atmospheres, home, away, things like that gives us a chance to just really sit back and look at what we really did. So we just really trying to get that edge back that we had, week 1, week 2, coming off the bye week, body feeling fresher, new mindset, kind of got a break away from it, then re-jump right back into it, jump back into Kansas. But really just focusing on the little things, getting back to playing our brand of football, playing one snap at a time, keying in on a small detail. So we're able to go, showcase us being fast, physical, and smart, things like that. So
last 2 games, both on the road, of course, but, falling them behind by a couple scores and then the defense have been able to kind of reverse course and shut things down from there on. What are some of the keys maybe to, not falling behind early on, 14-0?
Just starting fast. That's been an emphasis for me to the whole team. It's going to be an emphasis the whole week, just trying to start fast, really trying to start the game out with a bang, and then make them play catch up. But obviously, you can't control the game. You don't know how it's going to go. Obviously, the games we've been in, we responded pretty well. Some games more than others. But just really trying to emphasize them starting fast. And that's just really a mindset thing, going out there like, we're going to make this happen. We're going to get a stop. We're going to score, things like that. So offense, defense, special teams, just starting off fast, really, and keying into the little details.
So did it add a little bit of extra fuel to the fire, knowing that there was a loss before the bye week, so a little extra time for it to stew around a little bit?
Yeah, obviously, we obviously went back and watched the film, and a lot of people feel like we let that one go, we let that one get out of our hands, but obviously it's in the past now. All we can do is learn from our scars and keep building, but definitely a little bit of fuel to the fire, definitely under me. I've been trying to light the fire under these guys too. I really don't have to because, it's the same energy around the whole, building. We obviously know what happened coming out of bye week, but we want to, start fresh coming out this bye week and go attack it. So
obviously got a big matchup on Saturday night, Kansas offense that does a lot of good playmakers. What are some of the things that in your film study, your preparation for this Jayhawk offense that really kind of jump out to you about what they're going to bring?
I'm going to starting with the quarterback. He's a dynamic guy, can do it with his legs and arm. He likes to take a lot of risk. Likes to throw the guys that's open, not open, so things like that. And so that's going to have a lot of opportunities for us, just as a defense to create turnovers in the air. And then starting with the running back, he's a pretty dynamic guy too, pretty good running back. So really just emphasize just stopping the run. Just stopping the run is going to be the main thing. I feel like they like to base everything off their run game, a lot of motion shifts. Like to get your eyes messed up. They do a lot of the same things, but just try to get people out of position to get a step on you. So this week, keying in on our details, alignment, assignment, the little things is really going to be important. And then, stopping the run, playing more physical, playing faster than them, like I said, getting that edge back, starting fast, starting the game off fast, and then making them play our game that we want. Start throwing the ball around, get pressure on the quarterback, things like that.
It's been about a month or so, with the bye week and a couple of road games since there was a home game here. How much does that defense, when that crowd of Mountain America Stadium's rocking, how much do you guys feed off of that?
We feed off of it a lot. I don't think the fans know. I think they're starting to pick it up now, how much of a difference they're making, but it makes a huge difference. I heard is that it's supposed to be sold out, a couple of tickets away from being sold out. So, that gives us energy, it amps us up getting closer and closer to Saturdays because, we walk in there, it's going to be rocking. We want to put on a show for ourselves. We want to put on a show for us, ourselves, but mostly this fan base and everybody around here, just show the hard work that we've been putting in all the way through camp, the beginning of the season, and then now coming out of this bye week, so it'll be fun. It'll be fun on Saturday.
Where do you think that the team's kind of collective mindset is? Coming off of a loss, but it's still, overall, a 3-1 start's pretty good.
Yeah. I emphasized that to them today night. In my eyes, I think we 0-0. Scat mentioned it in the press conference, like we kind of have 3 different seasons. First season's really over, coming out the bye week, went 3-1. It is what it is, but ultimately we taking it game by game now, starting over 0-0. So ultimate goal is just to really go 1-0 this week, 1-0 this week and move on to the next week and go 1-0 again. So just staying focused, like little things, staying locked in, taking it day by day, winning the game that day of practice. Like today, Tuesday practice, winning the game today. Tomorrow, winning the game tomorrow. Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday you walk out there. You already know your preparation, everything, your confidence is this high. So it's time to go do it full speed then.
So Kenny talked about kind of the bye week as being a chance to kind of, take a step back, kind of, self-scout. When you kind of look back at these first 4 weeks, what are some of the things that really kind of jump out to you about your play and also the play overall of the defense?
I say in my play, I just try to bring the same mentality every single game. Like my passion so pure. Like I got a strong passion. So honestly, I just bring that to the game and then bring my keys and the techniques that my coach want me to use during the game. I just use that. And honestly, with the team, I say we've been playing as a great defense. Honestly, and really we just need to step it up during the last 2 games. I feel like we gave up things that we shouldn't have never gave up, but at the end of the day, like we still stopped them. Like as a defense as a whole, we stopped them. So I feel like we've been doing good. We've been doing great.
Now, in a situation like Texas Tech, where you guys they got a couple on you early, but then you were able to kind of turn around. Even kind of the Texas State game, kind of they rallied early, but you guys were able to kind of shut things down at the end.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that have been able to you guys collectively as a defense be able to face some adversity, but also kind of counterpunch?
Really just getting under our feet for real. Like I feel like we get out there first and we just too anxious, So honestly, just after the first couple plays where we gotta like dial it in, we know what we're supposed to do. So we just get on each other's ass, get on each other and just do what we're supposed to do.
So when you look at kind of your own individual play, how is it now that you got like 4 weeks in playing in this defensive scheme? What are some of the things that you really like about playing for the scheme of Brian Ward?
I'm very versatile. Like I can blitz, cover. I'm in the box too, so I got all 3 things to do as a safety. So I really, honestly, can't ask for nothing more.
You've delivered a number of big-time hits on some dudes. How satisfying is that? Just when you got a guy lined up and you just lay a lick on him.
Man, it's super satisfying. Honestly, I just gotta dial it down after the plays. I was getting too excited. Like,
So even that one play where we got the fight, coach kept you in. Is kind of I took that as kind of a sign of faith, and you went on, had a really good game and a number of big plays. What does it mean to you to you didn't get pulled? You're able to the coach has the faith in you, and you rewarded him with some good play.
Like you said, coach got the faith in me, so I just took that as he trusts me, and I gotta build the trust even more. So.
And so, of course, a big-time game. Kansas coming in with a lot of dangerous weapons on that offensive side. And your film preparation, kind of study for them. What are some of the things that Kansas really likes to do that jump out on film?
Run the ball and stop the ball. Honestly, like that's their philosophy that we seen. So that's what we really approaching them as.
Being back home, seems like a lot of great energy in the first couple of weeks of the season. How much does that defense feed when that crowd's really going?
Honestly, I feel like we're gonna give y'all something y'all ain't seen this week. Like we coming from two away games. Like we ain't been home in a minute, and we just came off a loss. Like we hungry. So
yeah, obviously having the loss and then the bye week, did that add a little bit extra fuel to the fire, knowing that was kind of you've had that loss kind of stew for a couple weeks?
Definitely, like we couldn't get our get back early,
All right, so what are going to be the top keys for this defense to shut down Kansas on Saturday night?
Top keys, just our eyes, recognizing the scheme and the formation that they in. And honestly, just keeping our eyes on the QB. Like that's the main player. That's a key player on their team. So that's what we're gonna do.
So Kenny talked about the bye week as being kind of an opportunity to kind of self-scout and take stock of the first 4 weeks. Over that time, over the bye week, what are some of the things that and you looking back at your play and maybe the play, the offense as a whole, that really kind of jumped out over the bye week?
Just going back, bye week is the time where we can mentally and physically reset. And so it wasn't as physically demanding, but like the intensity mentally was still there in the film room. Coaches want us on the iPad or on our phones watching film, getting the extra plays in. So it may not have been as physical on our feet, but mentally it's still the same. We still had a week time prep to get ready for Kansas.
Your last time out there against Texas Tech, unfortunately the loss as a team, but you were the most involved. I believe set a Sun Devil career high in catches. What was it like just after a couple weeks of maybe not getting as involved, but kind of be a go-to guy in a big game?
Yeah, just being ready. That's a testament to all the receivers. Like we all want to see each other eat, and sometimes your number's called, sometimes your number isn't. That's part of being receivers, just being humble enough to block for your guys, and most of the time you play 70 plays in a game, 90% of the time you're blocking. So what are you doing when you're not getting the ball? So the ball came to me last week, and I'm sure somebody else is going to get a lot of targets this week too. So it's just ebbs and flows of the game. Just got to stay focused and just be ready. Run every route like it's your last.
kind of with the ebbs and flows. The passing game overall has had some big moments and also some areas where that just wasn't really connecting. And over the bye week, what are some of the things that maybe you guys identified as to get the passing game more consistently on track?
Just timing, bro. Just everything just takes practice. Just getting together after practice, like Sam just staying after, throwing with his guys, just getting extra reps in. It's just pitch and catch, man. Everybody's here for a reason. Everybody can make those plays and stuff. So we just want to get together more, obviously throughout the game, but building that trust during practice. And it's just something that I've noticed Sam take a bigger leadership role. And calling guys back if they've dropped a route, like tell them to get back on the line, let's do it again. So stuff like that. We're seeing a lot of development from him and the receivers as well.
You're kind of along those lines, where have you seen the biggest growth in Sam from, taking that first snap in week one to now he's got 4 starts under his belt?
Yeah, he's had to grow up fast and collegiate wise, and he's got a great quarterback coach, behind his back, got his back, and you got Coach Dillingham obviously there, and he's developing fast. He's 19. That people see people on. I see people talking about him on social media and stuff. This kid's 19, man. He's not even old enough to drink yet. So he's got a lot of time to develop, and he's gonna be a great player in this league for a long time. And not even just to lead the country. I think he's gonna be able to help turn this program back to what Dillingham has envisioned.
Kansas has got a pair of corners. It's among the best in the conference, if not the country. And Kobe Bryant, Miller Dotson. What kind of jumps out to you about the upcoming matchup and the guys that you'll be facing squaring off of?
Yeah, that's what you want, man. A lot of people, have them as Sunday players. I think so too. After watching the film, they're long, athletic, good feet, and they're involved in the run game. It's gonna be a fun matchup. This is what you want, man. When scouts turn on the tape, they want to see how you do against players like this and stuff. So this is what you train for. All the hours that you put in by yourself, you're envisioning going against the top corners in the country, and the plays that you make against these types of corners feel way better than playing against a lesser opponent. But these guys are going to be fun matchup for us. It's going to show us where we're at, and I think we can go out there and just do our job. You don't got to play nothing different. Go out there, run, win our routes, and just play our game.
To kind of avoid, but just get the better of it, do well in the game on Saturday.
I mean, the kind of the chess match between DB and wide receivers, who's going to be detailed the most. As for receivers, are we going to get to our depths? Are we going to hold our lines? Or are we going to run back to the ball? And I'm sure on the other side, as DBs, it's just are they going to be able to do their job, what their coach should do? So it's just a battle of who's more disciplined. And obviously size and athleticism helps a lot, but that's why we're getting the reps, getting that film room, seeing, watching those plays, getting down our steps, and just routine catches, routine pitch and catch routes on air, stuff like that. So it's just being more disciplined. Who's gonna do their job on Saturday?
How do you think the bye week has impacted your ability physically and mentally to kind of recover after a big stretch of 4 games?
Yeah, bye weeks are always helpful mentally and physically, and just getting the guys just rested up, getting little knick-knack injuries, guys healed up, and then just getting that film book and getting that playbook so on Saturday you can just play free.
Do you have?
All right, joining us now on this week's Know Your Enemy segment to give us an inside look at Kansas is Jon Kirby, the publisher of Jayhawk Slant, part of the Rivals Network. Jon, thanks for coming on. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well. Appreciate you having me. Should be a pretty good game, I think, this weekend.
Absolutely. So let's kind of dive in. Maybe start off going a little bit back, because historically Kansas football program has been one among the most struggling programs in the country. But a few years ago, Lance Leipold comes on board and has really been able to turn things around. Prior to this year and those first 3 years, what has he been able to do to get the Kansas Jayhawks to have greater success?
I think the first thing they did was he brought a few transfers in from Buffalo when he came. And the thing that I've noticed, hey, listen, I've covered Kansas football for 25 years, so I've seen a lot of coaches come through here. He was able to build a culture that I think everybody bought in. And when you go back and look at we're in this day of the transfer portal, the kids stay at Kansas. I mean, sure, they lose a few, but if you look at his gains to his losses, he just doesn't lose players. And I think he's made the program a place that kids like to stay at the University of Kansas and play in his program. And they bought into his message. And you could tell from day one in this first season, at the very end of that year, they were turning things. And then he went to 2 bowl games after that. And, listen, the University of Kansas football program has only been to back-to-back bowl games twice in the history of their program. I mean, that's going back to the 40s. So, I mean, it goes to show you what he's been able to accomplish in a short amount of time.
So, obviously, Kansas comes into this year ranked in the top 25, but things just really haven't been able to pan out. 1-4 currently at this point. What are some of the things that have happened so far that have really led to the struggles and this, this start that certainly no Jayhawk wanted to have seen?
Yeah, it really starts, I think, with, there's a couple things, and it can get complex. First of all, you've got Jalen Daniels back at quarterback. I mean, he's been, over the last 3 years, when he's been healthy, he's been such a dynamic player for them. But he got hurt last year in the BYU game, which is about this time last year. He didn't play the rest of the season. Or, I'm sorry, that was the last game he played in. He got hurt before the Texas game. And then he sat out. He didn't play in spring football. He tried to get healthy in the summer, which he did, and then he came back for fall. So, some people chalked it up to a little bit of rust, maybe going into that, and he's trying to knock the rust off. But I mean, we're 5 games into this now, and he's thrown into some bad coverages. He's thrown some big interceptions. He just hasn't looked as crisp. I don't know if he's running the ball like he has. That's one of the things that Kansas has built over the last couple of years is they do some quarterback runs with him. They do some option. They do some design runs. So that part hasn't looked like it's supposed to. I mean, this guy was a Big 12 preseason player of the year. So, I mean, there have been that. Then you take the change of coordinator. You bring in Jeff Grimes. You lose Andy Kotelnicki to Penn State. And so you've got the new coordinator. You've got Jalen Daniels struggling, and receivers have dropping balls. And I don't know, this is the same group of receivers Jalen Daniels been throwing to for 3 years. So, I mean, it's been such a bizarre, everybody is trying to wrap their head around what's going on. And I'm going to be honest with you, in the end, I think Kansas is still a pretty good football team.
So yeah, even with these struggles and the changes on offense, and perhaps Jalen Daniels trying to maybe work some things out, what's just kind of the general sense, the overall feel around the program given this rough start?
It's hard to say, because up until now, we haven't had a chance to talk to the players this week yet, but up until now, they've been saying the right things. I mean, they've been saying that, listen, first of all, I want to backtrack. Kansas has 30 seniors on the team. So they're a senior-led team. They're the type of team that you figure when they lose to Illinois after leading in the fourth quarter, they're going to get back and rally. Then they go and they lose to UNLV. Then they've got West Virginia down by 11 and they lose. And they're in a tight game in the fourth quarter with TCU and they lose. And now you're sitting here and you're going, God, okay, they've got this senior leadership, and you're thinking guys are going to step up and they're going to right the ship. And it just hasn't happened yet. But up until this point, the seniors and the players have all said the right things, that, they come out and they've had good practices after these losses, and guys come out ready to play. And Kansas has not been pushed around. They haven't been beat. They've been beating themselves. So, I mean, I don't know if there's a game that Kansas has played this year that you left the stadium and said, boy, they just weren't the better team. I mean, they're as good as anybody they've played to this point.
Now, you mentioned just so much returning experience on the side of the ball, and especially on that offensive side. So, how much do you attribute these early season struggles to perhaps a new OC and Jeff Grimes, and maybe just kind of the newness there with the experience returning core?
I have asked people this, and they have not changed really anything. Now, maybe Jeff Grimes is calling the games different. Maybe he's doing things that weren't the same as before, but things like the offense is the same. Things like the pass concepts and the pass routes are the same. The new OC, Jeff Grimes, came in. He learned their language. He didn't make them learn his language, because these guys have been in the system for a long time. So, I just don't know if I buy this excuse that, the new OC is a big part of the struggles that they've had on offense. Now, maybe that, Jalen Daniels isn't used to maybe some of the things or the time of his callings. When Jeff Grimes came in, he started up in the booth or he started down on the field, the quarterback's coach, Jim Zebrowski, started in the booth. Well, the last few years, Zebrowski's been on the field, so people speculated that Jalen Daniels was more comfortable with the quarterback's coach on the field. Well, they made the switch 2 weeks ago. And, you're not seeing a lot of different results. So I think they're trying everything they can right now to figure out what's going wrong.
It seems like Kansas is continuing to have success on the ground. Obviously, Jalen Daniels is a guy who's made a number of big plays with his feet over the years, but Devin Neal's one of the conference's top backs. Daniel Hishaw has also really contributed as of late. What has made this ground game really so effective so far for the Jayhawks?
Well, they're good. Neal and Hishaw, I really think, have got to be probably, maybe the best 1-2 punch in the Big 12 at running back. They're very good. They've got a big physical offensive line. Now, they did lose a couple key pieces to that line, but they got Bryce Foster, a transfer from Texas A&M, who started there at center. He's played pretty well. They've done some shifting with some guys from right tackle to left tackle, but the line's played okay, and those guys are good running backs, and I think that right now is the strength of the team.
And switching over to the defensive side of the ball, what should the Sun Devil offense expect to see from that Kansas defense from a schematic standpoint?
Well, up until last week, I thought the Kansas defense had played pretty well. They led West Virginia by 11 late in the game. They gave up 2 big drives that allowed West Virginia to come back. But up until then, the Kansas defense is physical up front. They're deep at defensive tackle. They've got Jeremy Robinson, who's an experienced guy. The linebackers, I thought, for times have played better than last year's linebackers, and they lost a couple key guys. They have an experienced secondary. You've got Kobe Bryant and Mello Dotson, 2 guys that have been all Big 12 corners back there. You've got Marvin Grant at safety. You got O.J. Burrows. It's just it's so hard to explain, because they'll put some good series together, then they'll follow it up with a bad series, with 2 more good series, and then you'll have some missed tackles by guys who don't miss tackles. You'll have a missed assignment, and it's one of these things that you're sitting there and you're waiting, going, okay, somebody is going to get Kansas on the day that they finish a game. Somebody's going to get the Jayhawks on that day where they close out a game, and when they do, they're going to be tough to beat.
You mentioned a couple of those key defenders, and Dotson, Bryant, especially that cornerback combination could be a really interesting matchup against ASU's wide receivers. Are still trying to find some consistency there. So if I'm going to put you in the shoes of ASU offensive coordinator Marcus Arroyo, what kind of game plan would you draw up to attack this Kansas defense?
Well, now I've gone back and watched a little bit of Arizona State, and it looks like the quarterback's fairly athletic. Looks like he moves around fairly well. So that's one thing that I think Kansas had trouble with this year. Illinois quarterback, although he's not a real runner, had a couple nice runs that opened up things in the fourth quarter. The West Virginia running quarterback had some big runs for them, and then the UNLV quarterback, who we've heard his story. They couldn't get him on the ground. So if you can mix in some QB run game along with that really good running back from Arizona State, and then that opens up some passing lanes, I think they're going to have to establish the ground game, because one thing Kansas has done to this point, they have played the run fairly well. They've got about 5 defensive tackles that they rotate. They're strong. They keep them fresh. I hear the kickoff time, the weather in Tempe is going to be absolutely scorching on Saturday. Yeah. So, they've got some depth there. So it'll be an interesting thing. But if I was the Arizona State offensive coordinator, I would try to be multiple against the Kansas defense, because I think if you let Kansas settle in and say, we're going to stop this, they can do that. The offenses they've struggled with are guys that can also have a quarterback that add that element of running to it.
So guys like Daniels, Neal, Dotson, Bryant, those are some names that are some players that have made their name in this Big 12 conference. Who are some guys maybe a little bit under the radar, some X-factor type players that you think that will ultimately play a big role in deciding Saturday's outcome?
Well, there's one name that I would have definitely thrown out, and we're just trying to wait and figure out if he's going to be healthy, but he missed last week's game. His name's Cornell Wheeler. He's a linebacker. He's a 4-star transfer from the University of Michigan. He stepped up there and looked real good. I'll tell you a guy that could play some snaps from the state of Arizona, DJ Warner. He was a highly recruited guy out of the state there, and he's starting to play a little bit more at defensive end, which is the Jayhawks need a pass rush. they have really struggled on that pass rush defensive end. They lost Austin Booker last year. He left early, went to the Chicago Bears, and they haven't been able to fill that void. I'm trying to think of a name that would. Luke Grimm. I'll tell you what, Luke Grimm, wide receiver, is probably a guy that doesn't get the headlines around the conference, but the Kansas fans sure know him. He's been their most consistent receiver. So there's a couple right there.
All things considered, after this 1-4 start, just how important, how critical is Saturday's matchup to Kansas right now?
Well, it's big because they are trying to become the first team in the history of Kansas football to go to 3 consecutive bowl games. And right now, you're staring at 1-4. Okay, now you got to go on a road and play Arizona State, where I read today that they're close to selling the stadium out, and they're going to be ready to play. They're going to be ready. They're coming off a bye week. Then Kansas will go home, and then they'll go on a bye. And then you've got Houston, which is a winnable game, but you've still got Iowa State. You've still got to go to BYU. You've still got to go to Kansas State. And to get that 6 wins and get to that 3 straight bowls, I mean, this is a huge game for KU, in my opinion.
So kind of maybe pulling back to the bigger picture right now, from the Kansas side of things, what's the perspective of the Big 12 adding ASU, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado, and kind of making this the Big 16?
Yeah, I think there was excitement there, and I'll tell you why. I know from the Kansas fan base, I got to be careful how I say this. I don't want to say it's an arrogant fan base, but the history of the basketball program and the University of Kansas being the flagship school in the state, I've always felt that when the first round of realignment came in and they got Central Florida and Cincinnati and Houston, I think Kansas fans kind of put their nose up in the air a little bit, like, hold on, is that what you want? But then when you brought in Arizona State, and Colorado, and when you brought in Utah in that group, I think the fans went, okay, this is more what we're talking about, right? These are Pac-12 schools. These are known commodities. So I think the fan base was much more excited to see this recent group of 4 added from the Pac-12.
Well, Jon, thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise and insight. Encourage our listeners and viewers to head over to Jayhawk's Land, get to know ASU's upcoming opponent. Should be a real fun one on Saturday. Thanks again, Jon.
Thanks for having me.
So ASU faces Kansas on the gridiron. I know there are limited examples of the Sun Devils versus KU in just about any sport. Now, granted, 2 ideas that come to mind for Sun Devil basketball fans, I'm sure, are some of the most exciting and positive memories that Sun Devils have had in the last decade or so. Of course, those 2 huge victories in basketball, I believe it was 2017 and 18, and then 18 and 19, first in Lawrence, then in Tempe. But now things get going on the football field. Kansas football, been a real, interesting case study over the last few years. For those of us who have been following the college football for a few decades, we know them, generally speaking, as, with all due respect, one of the bottom-feeding teams in all of college football. I mean, heck, I remember there was that time when that team down south had that wonderful losing streak they were on. I think the only team that had one worse than them at one point was Kansas back there just a few years ago. But then, things really started to move in a positive direction. I mean, you had some good coaches there otherwise that couldn't get things done. Charlie Weiss, Les Myles, that was obviously a fiasco. They couldn't turn it around. But after the 2021 season, after 6 years at Buffalo, Lance Leipold came about to be the head coach. And, man, the turnaround that he's had, one of the best coaching jobs really in the country, I think, over the last few years. He was 2-10 in year 1. Then they reached bowl eligibility with a 6-7 final record in 2022. That was Kansas's first bowl game since 2008. Then a 9-4 finish last year in a bowl win. That's the first bowl victory and final season ranking since 2007. Only the 4th time in the last 50 years that Kansas has finished the season with the top 25 standing. So they had a ton of momentum at the end of last year heading into this season. And to begin the year, that was shown in the preseason AP poll where they were number 22 in the country. So they got one of the finest head coaches in college football. A lot of tenured players. This is a senior-heavy or an experience-heavy team, as you heard. But as we'll talk about here in a moment, things just have not really shown to be that way with a 1-4 start on the field this year.
Yeah, I've always had a soft spot for those like historically bad programs that find success. And like I remember like that crazy 2007 season where everything was just weird. Like I think UCF or USF rather was a number 2 at one point, and of course Kansas makes the run to the Orange Bowl, and they were like I believe a win against Mizzou away from maybe playing for a national title with Aqib Talib, and it was Todd Reesing was the quarterback. Some crazy times back then, but of course, yeah, one of the most historically just pitiful programs. But you know what Lance Leipold's been able to do, and just not just make them a quality program in his relatively brief tenure, but really a fun team to watch. The offense that they've been able to put forth the last couple of years, prior to 2024, has been incredibly fun to watch and entertaining, pulling off some big wins. But yeah, as we'll dive into, Joe, just the wheels have really come off, and really just the list of most disappointing teams in the country heading into this season. I think right there, Kansas is right at the top.
Yeah, so how things have shaken out for them so far through the early stretch of the 2024 season. They began with a 48-3 win over FCS Lindenwood, so kind of business as usual there. No real red flags that I could think of. But man, just that was followed by a stretch of tough one-score losses in 3 straight games. A 23-17 loss at Illinois, 23-20 defeat to UNLV, and then a 32-28 loss at the hands of West Virginia. And then last week, Kansas lost again in Big 12 action, 38-27 to TCU. So against FBS opponents this year, Kansas is 0-4. They failed to score more than 28 points in any single game against that level of competition. Now, obviously, these are not, bad teams. They're not losing to, I guess a bunch of nobodies or that sort of thing. They're just having such a difficult time getting over the hump. Again, you heard about it in our Know Your Enemy segment. Just a very difficult time closing out games.
And this team, and all 4 of those losses have led at some point in the fourth quarter, and that's pretty hard to do. So you wonder if there's maybe a kind of maybe a progression up to the mean at some point where this bad luck can't continue, or maybe this is just kind of one of those snake bitten type of seasons. And with 30 seniors, a very veteran group on both sides of the ball, it's just really just kind of just disheartening to see a program kind of fall from grace when really, usually sometimes you see these stark declines when maybe the star quarterback gets hurt or something, but nothing like that. So far, Jalen Daniels, who has had his own injury history, a guy I had as my preseason first team all Big 12 quarterback, just has not been able to be the level of playmaker he has. And, we'll dive into the offense in a second, but I think a big key here is, losing the offensive coordinator, Andy Kolodnicki. He's, I believe, at Penn State at this time. Jeff Grimes, a name very familiar to folks in the Big 12 footprint. He's taken over, but just really have not been able to get this high-flying, high-scoring, and very entertaining Kansas offense for the last couple of years on track.
Yeah, you talked about Jalen Daniels, and of course, as we say that name and as you think it in your heads there, folks, let's enunciate. It's Jalen Daniels, different from a different human being. He kind of, as you mentioned, he's had a tough time getting things going, kind of just symbolic of this season. It really has his career been for Kansas. He's one of those experienced guys, a fifth-year player, but he's a junior because he has the COVID season and he redshirted last year after not playing in enough games to, meet a full year of eligibility. 2022 had an absolute breakout season for that bowl-eligible Kansas team, but man, this 5-game start for him is very forgettable as well. He's only completing 53% of his passes, 8 interceptions to just 5 touchdown throws. Only one player in the nation has thrown more interceptions than Daniels so far. It's that Jake Garcia, if you remember, semi-long-term recruiting followers for ASU. He was in the mix for the Sun Devils. He's got 11 picks so far, so I guess that's good to avoid. But
so where is he now? Just real quick, because he was at USC, then Miami. Maybe there's been a few spots at Garcia.
I think. Let's see. I was looking it up on the spot. Let's take a look. I want to make a guess. That's where he's at the East Carolina.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
which I don't believe is stop number 1 for him by any stretch. Exactly. So
yeah, wild times.
There you go. But yeah, so health has always been an issue. I mean, the most games he's ever played in a single season, and again, he's a 5th-year guy, is just 9 games. And the turnover issues this year, that's a big thing. 8 interceptions in 5 games. But he has the talent. He's got the experience. He has done it at this level. Really just strikes you as like a boom or bust type of player. But again, someone that's got the experience to be able to pull games, pull some magic out of the hat, when necessary. But so far, it's been a struggle.
a very potent dual threat quarterback, a guy who can hurt you through the air and on the ground. But yeah, as you mentioned, the turnover issues are really pronounced. 8 picks so far this year, and just hasn't been the same player. We'll wonder if it's like there's the pressure mounting is with all the preseason expectations, the hype, and just because really this is a very veteran side of the ball. I mean, this is a backfield that he's very familiar with. Guys that he's in the receiving group have been guys he's been throwing to for years. So they've kind of reshuffled the line a little bit over the offseason, but really the skill guys around him are names and guys that he has built a rapport and a chemistry with. So to see really things just kind of fall off a little bit and just not have that level of success, and so far he's stayed healthy, and that's been a great sign. But just unfortunately for him and this Kansas offense, the explosiveness and the potency just isn't there.
Yeah, though there are consistency issues at quarterback and in the pass game this season, there are no such issues on the ground for Kansas. Run the ball very, very well. They average 226 yards per game at nearly 6 yards per carry as a team, 11 rushing touchdowns. They rank 15th nationally in rush offense and yards per carry. So they can get it done on the ground. As we mentioned, Daniels can do it, but they've got a star running back, Devin Neal. He has 513 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, averaging about 102 yards per game, 6 yards per carry. He ranks 20th nationally in rushing yards per game. He had a monster year last year. It was his second consecutive 1,000-yard year. He went over 1,200 rushing yards in 2023, 17 combined touchdowns between rushing and receiving. He was a second-team All-Big 12 pick last year. Overall, for his full body of work, he's got over 3,500 career rushing yards. So assuming he stays healthy this year, he should get to that 4,000 mark. That 4,000-yard mark for his career, which is a rare thing for folks to do at the college level. So he is a very, very special player that ASU, for the second straight game is going to have a star-studded NFL caliber running back. They're going to have to try to keep him in check.
Yeah, and he's joined the backfield by Daniel Highshaw, and those two guys, bigger backs, 215, 220 pounders, and Devin Neal has just been really fun to watch, and he's a guy who can make some explosive plays as a receiver as well, as you mentioned with his combined total touchdown number a season ago. So you kind of have a three-headed rushing attack for Kansas, and that's the offensive struggles, which have been pretty pronounced, but that has been their most consistent element. So it'll be a big test for this Sun Devil defense that should be getting some more reinforcements back in the lineup.
And to put some numbers on what Highshaw has do as the backup running back, 262 yards and 3 touchdowns. He hasn't lost a single yard yet on any of his carries, and he averages nearly 7 yards per carry. So that's one of those guys that whenever he touches the ball, there can be some fireworks. So certainly on the ground, ASU is going to have a lot to deal with. Focusing on the pass game, fifth-year senior Luke Grimm, you heard him as one of the players to keep an eye on, the X-Factor type of players. He gets the high bulk of the work. He's got 30 receptions for 317 yards, 4 touchdowns. Behind him, fellow fifth-year senior Lawrence Arnold. He was the team's leading receiver last year. He has 15 catches for 209 yards and a touchdown. But other than those two, only one other player on the roster has a touchdown reception, and no other player has more than 8 catches on the year. I know obviously ASU's had its own issues and struggles as far as spreading out the passing attack. Kansas, you can say the same because you've got Grimm right there at the top, Arnold doing a good job as well, but from there, not a great deal of contribution from the other pass catchers.
Yeah, not a whole lot of mystery as to where Daniels is looking when he drops back to pass. Yeah, I believe Grimm's got like 40% of the team total of like 74 catches or so on the season. But they're also some guys with some good size as well. We've Arnold's a big body guy, 6'3", Quentin Skinner with one of those guys with 8 catches, a 6'5" target. So ASU's corners had some issues playing against Texas Tech. Granted, this could be an offense that might be runs some different route tree combinations and such. Facing the Sun Devil defense, but we'll see if the corners are going to be able to be accountable, because I think ASU might come into this game looking to shut down the run, place some of those corners in some positions where they're going to have to hold things down.
And so moving over to the defense, I mean, as you look at the numbers and all the efforts, I mean, their defense is doing a solid job. I mean, even though they've lost 4 games, they're not certainly not getting blown out, and they're not letting up a extremely high total of points. They're just aren't able to, kind of win that foot race with other teams. when you put some numbers on it, one that stands out, they're good against the run. They only allow 127 yards per game, just about 3.5 yards per carry, and 5 touchdowns in those 5 games. So obviously, that's going to be ASU's bread and butter, as we'll focus on the keys here in a moment. But the ground game is going to play a huge factor in this game as far as who can do what. That's probably going to result in who ends up on the high side of things on the scoreboard. Just to put some names to things, Mello Dotson at cornerback leads the team in tackles with 27. That's kind of an issue as well. You certainly don't want to have those defensive backs being your top tacklers. He has 3 interceptions. There are only 2 players in the country that have more than his 3 INTs. Defensive end Jeremy Robinson, he has 5.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. He leads Kansas in both categories. Linebacker J.B. Brown, a former Bowling Green transfer, he's second on the team in tackles with 25. Also second in TFLs and sacks with 5 and 2 respectively. So they have a few guys that can affect you in a number of ways. They've got some good players there in the secondary, but they're still clamping down on the run against teams. So it's a solid defense ASU is going to have to contend with.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what kind of game plan Marcus Arroyo draws up, because, they have pretty good up front, especially in the middle at defensive tackle, some good stuff at linebackers, but really the strength really jumps out to you at the cornerback position. You mentioned Mello Dotson, Kobe Bryant. Those are one of the best combinations of corners in the league, if not, the entire Big 12 and among the better in the country. And really just interesting to see how ASU's wide receivers, who we've talked about, last week with Ralph Ames, and the receiver group for the Sun Devils has really been kind of flying a little bit under the radar in terms of their production against their potential and their talents. And after a showing against Texas Tech where the passing game just really wasn't there, they're going to be in the home field, not to put up with the hostile atmosphere. We've seen some better performances there, so it'll be interesting to see exactly how Jordan Tice and Melquan Stovall, Jake Smith, Xavier Guillory, those guys are going to be able to match up against a pretty good and experienced Jayhawk defensive backfield.
And I'm also really eager to see how things pan out, as you heard our Know Your Enemy insider from Kansas talk about. The Jayhawks have had some issues with mobile quarterbacks, and we certainly know that Sam Levitt can do that. So ASU on the ground really going to have to be able to assert itself. Obviously, that's its bread and butter, but you can't be one-dimensional. So you're going to have to spend some time challenging those talented cornerbacks for Kansas and the defense as a whole to be able to try to do as much as you possibly can there. Taking a quick look at special teams, their place kicker Tabor Allen, he's 5 for 5 on field goals with a long of 41. So obviously not a ton of experimentation as far as long kicks, but you can't do any better than a perfect slate there. Their punter Damone Graves averages almost 47 yards per punt. He ranks 7th nationally in punting. So if this happens to be a close game where special teams can play a huge factor, they've got some talent there in the kick game. Not a ton as far as guys that have created much damage, at least this year, in the return game. So as we kind of scroll back on, this Kansas team, they have some proven commodities on offense, but it all gets started with that quarterback and how consistent he can be so that teams don't just hone in on trying to stop Neal in that run game, which, you certainly could make that argument as a knock against ASU as well so far this season. Defensively, they have some solid areas that ASU is simply going to have to attack, and it'll be a strength versus strength type of situation when you have ASU's run game against a pretty good Kansas rush defense. So if we are moving our way to the keys for this game, I mean, the first one to me, I think, is a very obvious one. I would imagine we both have it in some capacity, however we want to word it, but basically you got to force Jalen Daniels to throw the ball. You have to find a way to limit that ground attack, put the ball in his hands and the game on his shoulders, because as he's shown this year with the element of being turnover prone, and ASU being one of the better teams so far this year in terms of generating turnovers, and significantly better than ASU was last year at that sort of thing, that's going to be a huge factor. If you let Kansas just run all over you, then that's one that could slip away toward the opposing team.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I had that right there. And it's kind of weird to say almost that, usually it's like, if the quarterback's a question mark, make that guy beat you. Well, make the preseason all Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year beat you. It's kind of weird to say maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, but that's just really how it is right now. I'd like to see ASU just make sure that they're able to kind of contain that very potent Kansas ground game and see what Jalen Daniels can do. And ASU's secondary and defense overall has showed some pretty good ball hawking instinct so far, and they've been really getting after it. So I would love to see ASU have a much better showing on the ground. We saw them make some good adjustments against Texas Tech after they fell behind, unfortunately 14-0, to force the Red Raiders to beat them on the ground, and they did relatively a good job, which helped ASU get back into that game. So this, I think, is going to be another stiff challenge in that regard. So to see ASU's defense needs to step up and really kind of put this game on Jalen Daniels' arm.
So the second one for me kind of factors into that first one, and it is one of those obvious type of things, but in this game it really proves true, is winning the turnover battle. ASU ranks 12th nationally in turnover margin at +5. Kansas is tied for 108th at -4. We talked about the issues at quarterback with the interceptions. ASU has taken pretty good care of the ball. I know that a lot of emphasis has been placed on a few interceptions that have been thrown these past two games by Sam Leavitt, but by and large, ASU has taken care of the ball and has done a much better job, obviously, than last year in terms of takeaways. So in a game like this, I would imagine that if you look at the box score and see who has the edge in the turnover battle, almost a guarantee, in my opinion, that that's going to be the team that wins the game, especially if ASU can be the one to, get a gap of a few turnover differential. Because if Kansas can give the Sun Devils some possessions, some freebies there, that is going to have a huge influence on who wins this game.
My number 2 key is ASU's got to get back to starting fast. I mean, they obviously put together some really impressive starts and putting their first two opponents really behind the 8 ball from the jump, and then had a good kind of start on the road against Texas State before the Bobcats kind of rallied there and made things a little bit perilous for a while there in the first half. But ASU, of course, had a disastrous first 9 minutes last time out against Texas Tech. Back in the friendly confines, the very hot confines of Mountain America Stadium, ASU is one of those teams that's very pronounced in terms of their home versus away performance in recent years. So they're going to have the home crowd behind. Kenny Dillingham said earlier today that he expects this thing should be close, if not a sellout. So I would like to see ASU feed off the energy, get off to another fast start, because I don't know that they necessarily want to get into a game where the Kansas team, probably with their backs against the wall, knowing that they have their chance to be the first 3 consecutive bowl appearance team in program history is slipping away, and the margin for error is not there. So like ASU, they're going to be getting Kansas's best, I believe, on Saturday. So a fast start can go a long way for the Devils to get that all-important 4th win.
So my third and final key includes that, but extends to the entire game. Playing with fire and focus. What I mean by that is basically don't do what you did in the early stretch of the game against Texas Tech. ASU was really on their heels for that opening stretch of the game. The energy was not there. The execution was not there. You saw some boneheaded penalties that were costly and could have been a lot more costly. And if any of that kind of thing repeats, then it certainly will be costly, which is a far deviation from what we saw, especially in the first 2 games of this season, and still even the Texas State game, because the very, very beginning of that was good in terms of ASU scoring, Texas State not. Things obviously went sideways for a little bit before the Devils were able to come back. But in this particular ball game, you want to come out with a lot of energy, and I think that should be something that should be easy, not just being at home, not just being rested after a bye week, but also, like you said, there should be a dang good crowd out there at Mountain America Stadium, close to, if not, accomplishing a sellout crowd. So you want to have that energy. You certainly don't want to be playing timid. You don't want to be playing nervous or frustrated or anything like that. You want to be loose. You want to have that swagger going, but you got to keep it just on that side of still being able to execute, still having your head focused, but still have that energy among you, because these are the kind of things that, as we've seen, those 2 home games for ASU, we saw them spiral out of control, meaning out of the control of the opposing team pretty quickly. Mississippi State came back on it. Wyoming definitely didn't. So we have kind of seen that thing in those first 2 games where ASU can get things rolling early and get a lot of momentum. If that can happen, especially as you talked about this Kansas team having its back against the wall, now that can bring out the best in a team, because that means it's like do or die, but that can also emphasize and really amplify how catastrophic mistakes can be. You know, if ASU goes out in their opening possession and forces a turnover, the Kansas team could be rattled. Like we saw that Wyoming team fall apart just in minutes into the game. If you can somehow follow that blueprint, that would be huge, because winning this game is absolutely crucial. And in my opinion, you don't get to a bowl game if you're ASU in 2024 without winning this game. But also, if you can get some style points, that can help as well.
My third and final key is kind of focusing on the Sun Devil passing game. Now, you mentioned earlier, I think that Kansas got probably the best set of corners in the conference right now, but I do think that ASU has a real opportunity in this matchup to attack the seams, utilize those tight ends even more. They had some good success against that in the win over Texas State. Shimon Mateer has proven to be a pretty good tight end and really kind of flashing some potential, developing that chemistry with Sam Leavitt. Been pretty quiet, relatively speaking, from a receiving standpoint by Marquiston Douglas, Cameron Harpole. That I think there might be a time where they get those guys involved, because maybe on the outside things are a little tougher with those very quality corners. But I think ASU has the ability with their group of tight ends to attack the seams and extend those drives. Because Kansas does have a pretty good run defense. So ASU's and Sam Leavitt is going to need to make some good throws, and he's not going to be able to have those freshman moments that he had last time out against Texas Tech and expect ASU to get a win. I think, they say the old adage goes, a tight end is a quarterback's best friend, and I think he's got a pretty good one in Mateer, and I'd like to see him get, 7, 8, 9 targets on Saturday night.
So now we're going to take a look at how we see this ball game shaking out, and trust me, this is a big one for ASU, and I'm sure that y'all watch and listen to this already know that. For me, I'm going to say it, in my view, this is a must-win game for Arizona State. You have a Kansas team that has talent, and they had high expectations coming into this season. They've done some very good things, especially the last couple of years, and very much especially last year. But this is this year. They are 1-4. They've got a lot of talent. They've got a lot of experience. But the outcome has been 4 losses, 4 consecutive losses. They're going to have their backs up against the wall. That can bring out the best or worst in them. If you're ASU, to me, this is one that you have to get on that quest toward bowl eligibility, on that quest to just make sure that you don't keep those cynical voices in the fan base from getting too loud. Because if you drop this one to a 1-4 team, even if they're a preseason top 25 team, after having lost a game to, still a solid Texas Tech team, but a game that ASU had opportunities to win, especially if it had gotten out to a better start. You put all that together and people can start to get a little disgruntled, which seems like a really weird paradigm shift after just, 3 weeks ago, life was real good as a 3-0 team. And I'm not trying to be too much of an alarmist. I'm not trying to say, woe is me, or that the season's about to fall away from ASU. But those exciting things that people hoped would be possible after that 3-0 start, you can kind of get back to that optimism if you get a win here, you get to 4-1, and then, you look at the rest of your schedule. But it could be hard to stop the bleeding, especially if a loss happens this Saturday. So, again, I know we're still within the first half of the season, but a lot on the line. Again, especially since ASU's coming out after a bye week. So, for me, it's a huge deal to get back home. You don't have those opposing crowds hollering at you that are begging for momentum plays from their team and really jumping on you if you make any sort of mistakes. I think it's a good opportunity to reset back at home after the bye week. That's going to help ASU out. The fact that Jalen Daniels is turning over the ball quite a bit, I think is going to help ASU, because that's going to enable the Sun Devils to really get some of those back-breaking plays and get things going in their direction. Once again, for the third straight game, I expect this one to be a dogfight. I could see a scenario where ASU can win handily, but I don't necessarily predict that to be the case. However, I feel like ASU is going to be able to do enough in the run game, and I think that Sam Leavitt will make enough plays, and which are not going to be countered by enough mistakes. And I think ASU's defense is going to make enough plays as well for the Sun Devils to walk out of Mountain America Stadium with a 27-20 victory.
All right, 27-20. Nice. I think that's kind of in line with what Vegas was thinking. I saw it at one point at least, because ASU did open as a home favorite. But I agree, Joe. I think that term you used, dogfight, I think, because that's probably going to describe every game left on the schedule. as we saw this past weekend, Big 12's wide open. Not saying that it's wide open necessarily this year for ASU to waltz in and make a title game appearance, but there's a lot of parity in this league outside of Houston. And this is a Kansas team that is still very talented on both sides of the ball, very experienced. They've been in some big games over the last few years. And heading on the road to face the newcomer in Arizona State, don't think they're going to get rattled too much. Now, it'll be interesting to see exactly if, after a 1-4 start, where the mentality is, especially if ASU is able to start fast and get up by a score or two. But I think this is going to be a back and forth battle early on. And I think that, into the third quarter, we're going to see these two teams be locked in a stalemate, kind of a one-score game. I do think, though, what we see with ASU getting a lot of reinforcements, getting healthy. Kenny Dillingham mentioned in his Monday presser that Cole Martin's really the only two-deep guy that is going to be out of the lineup, and of course he's out for the year. That means a number of key pieces, and especially on that defensive side, the difference that Jacob Kangike can make at that defensive tackle spot, working with CJ Fight, could be very significant in slowing down that Kansas run game. Now, that's much easier said than done, but ultimately, I think that we've seen from home ASU in this 2024 version versus kind of the sluggishness and the expected struggles on the road is going to play a key role here. I think ultimately in that fourth quarter, ASU riding some of that energy, playing at home, and having shown the ability to take some punches, take some counter punches, and still get up and deliver a knockout blow is going to prove important. I think ultimately Sam Leavitt maybe gets some goodwill back with some clutch performances plays in the second half. ASU moves to 4-1 thanks to a 31-24 victory. And that's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. I'd like to thank our great guests that joined us earlier in this episode. Of course, as we mentioned, this game kicks off at 5 p.m. TV is on ESPN2. Now, make sure you are, of course, staying with the show on the social media side. Follow us on Twitter at SOTD Podcast, Instagram at Speak of the Devils. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, and give me a follow on all things social at BDenny29.
And you can follow me at Joe Healy 42. As always, a huge shout out and a major thank you to our incredible sponsors: Jones Auto Group, DevilsDigest.com, Cactus Sports, Burrito Express, The Spaghetti Shack, and Sun Devil Family Charities.
Once you're done supporting our amazing sponsors, make sure to drop us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. And Joe and I will be back next week as we break down whether ASU did get that crucial win or not against Kansas and preview a rivalry game potentially against Utah.